I'm Jen. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Umber Wines. As we mentioned, all of our wines are made by women winemakers in Champagne, Napa, and Sonoma. And we were originally funded entirely by women, but we've recently done some fundraising from men, which is great. So I'm going to talk today about how to raise money. I've done a lot of this, and I'm going to be very transparent and open about my own process, how much I've raised, valuation on the businesses, all these kinds of things. And I'm happy to share these details with you. I'm also happy to share all of my fundraising decks with you, so I'll send those around afterwards, and hopefully it'll be helpful. Of course, absolutely. So I tried to build the talk today that I thought would have been helpful for me 3 years ago. So I hope it's helpful. So I've had 3 companies that I've raised money for. I had Magnum PR I bootstrapped, and that was a profit-based business that I hired a couple employees for, and it was a service-based business, and all of our profits went back to me. And then I founded both the Riddler in San Francisco and the Riddler in New York. Those were 2 champagne bars. All of our investors in both of those locations were women. So we had 33 investors in San Francisco, 40 in New York, all women, all amazing, all who love champagne and sparkling wine. And out of the ashes of the Riddler closing, we had to close both locations permanently in San Francisco and New York because of COVID. So I've been there with all of you. I launched Une Femme. Our first wine that we launched was called the Juliet. It was our organic, small grower-producer champagne, and that business has grown a lot. So even though my first 2 businesses, which were funded by investors, went out of business, a lot of those investors have come back to invest in Une Femme, which is amazing. I'm going to walk you through the specifics of it, but I'll give you a little bit more background on these 2 businesses first. So as I said, both of our champagne bars, all funded entirely by women. And one of the things that we found was that a lot of our guests, when they would come to the Riddler, would be drinking champagne and sparkling wine. And we had a huge champagne list, and it was sometimes a little overwhelming for the guests. And so we started featuring women-made wines on the list. And those wines would outsell every other wine, because it was like all of you getting together with your friends. Which wines should I drink? Oh, these are made by women. Of course, I'm going to support those. And I heard from guests again and again, how can I find women-made wines when I'm in a restaurant or a retail shop? And I was like, why is there not a brand for this? So tomorrow, I'll be talking about how to extend your lines of revenue with CPG extensions of your brand. And that's what became Une Femme. So Une Femme has grown a lot. We started as doing one small grower-producer champagne out of the Riddler. And then we were extremely lucky to start a partnership with Delta Airlines. So we started doing a 1-month trial with them with a sparkling rosé from California. We started with that in October of 2021 for 1 month. And then that's grown into a full-time, now it's a global partnership. So if you ever fly Delta, if you ever drink sparkling wine, you will drink our wine, which is so cool. Very, very, very cool. That's a California sparkling wine. And because of that, we've seen a real massive growth trajectory of the business. And because of that, we've been able to raise a lot of money to continue to grow. So it's a very different style of business. So here is what I've raised. Over the past 3 years, I've raised over $17 million of funding, which is a lot. And I started really small. So the first business that I raised for was the Riddler in San Francisco. We raised $650K from 33 investors, all of whom were private individuals. And I structured that with Stephanie's recommendation, most likely, as a traditional LLC, so limited liability corporation. So I was personally not liable for the business technically. And we structured this as a dividend-based business, meaning that when we made profit, we would return it back to the investor, some portion of it. We structured ours as what's called a preferred return. So gave back the investors' profit before we paid ourselves back as owners of the company, up to a point of 120%. So I never got to the 120% payback for them because we had to close the business, but that was the idea, was that we were raising this money so that over time, the profits would go back to them first. Once they got paid back fully, it would flip, and then we would be splitting the profits according to everybody's ownership structure. So that's a pretty good way to structure a fundraise for a restaurant, because it really limits the risk that an angel investor, a friends and family investor might have. So you're saying, I'm not going to take a lot of the profits. I'm going to give you all the profits first, and then once I pay you back, then I'll start paying myself a cut of the profits. So we raised $650K for that. We did it in $20,000 units and sold about 80% of the company for that one. All of our investors for that were friends and family. For the second business, the Riddler in New York, we got fancier, and New York is more expensive. So we raised $1.5 million. We sold 70% of the company, so we sold a little bit more of the company, but we started raising in 50K units. And for that, we also did 120% preferred return. And that was all friends and family, 40 investors, all of whom were women. And then once we got to Unfem, the first round that we did was a 600K safe. So that's what we were talking about earlier, a safe note, the idea that it was, it's like a promise of future equity. And for that, we established what our cap was going to be, which in our first round was $3 million. So we said, today, we haven't launched anything. We have no idea where this business is going. We're going to guess that this is worth around $3 million. And our first two angel investors were two of our lead investors in the Riddler. So even though the Riddlers had closed, they agreed to invest in this business because they believed in me as a founder, and they were along for the ride. They love champagne, they love women, and they wanted to get behind us. So they invested in a pre-seed safe of $600K at a $3 million cap. Then we needed more money. We raised another $1 million for that particular round. That came from angel investors, as small as 10K checks, 20K checks, 50K checks. And then we also raised from quite a few SPVs. SPVs are an amazing resource for all of you outside of angel investors. So it's called a special purpose vehicle. It's a way to get a group of investors involved in your business while only having one of them on the cap table. So one person agrees to manage a group of investments. They typically take a carry. They take some sort of percentage. They might take a fee. They generally run it through AngelList, which is a really helpful resource. So if you want to get a bunch of people involved, but you don't want to manage a zillion people calling you, you can get somebody to organize an SPV. And the best way to find out about SPVs is probably through AngelList, through their website. They've got a lot of great resources on that. So we got some cool SPVs. I also found some angel investment groups just by Googling angel investor group. And some of those checks were like $100,000 or $150,000. But that year of raising $1 million it took a full year. It was really, really, really hard to do.
What year was that?
That was 2021. 2021, so tough time. We're like getting this $10,000 check here, $10,000 check here. But then when we got our deal with Delta, all of those investors, we went back out to them and said, we need another $1 million. And overnight, we raised $3 million from the same group. So it shows you that when you've got really good relationships with your investors, a lot of them might put in $10,000 today, but in the future, they might have $30,000 for you or $50,000 for you once you've shown some good traction. So what took us a year then took less than 24 hours, and we had way more money than we knew what to do with, which was really great because we needed it again in the future. And then we just closed our Series A, which we did as a priced round. We set out to do a $6 million raise. We ended up having a huge amount of oversubscription, so we raised $14 million in that round. And I will also say, of that 14 was more than we needed in the business, and my co-founder and I decided to sell some of our equity. So we did what's called a secondary sale. So we sold a percentage of our ownership, so we took some money off the table. That basically means we paid ourselves. So I really, really, really want to emphasize to all of you in here the importance of, if you get to a point where you can take money off the table, you must. You absolutely should. Some investors will tell you not to do it. They don't want you to do it. Some investors will tell you they want you to do it. But I have to say, these first two businesses, the Riddler, San Francisco, and New York, I never paid myself $1. I also took, for the second one, I had a personal guarantee on my lease. I closed that business. I had to pay off that landlord a huge amount of money. And I was only able to do it because I took money out of UnFem. So make sure you pay yourself. It's incredibly, incredibly important. Like, your business is not a charity. You are a professional. You are worth the money. Think about how much you would pay somebody in your business. Pay yourself at least that much, if not more. Okay, so how do you do it? So I'm going to talk through some really tactical things and tips and tools, and also show you some slides from my decks. Again, I'm happy to share all of this, and you can have the decks themselves, which are much more detailed. But I think the first thing that you want to do is to think about, what do you want to be the first, the best, or the only at? When somebody walks by your restaurant, what do you want them to say? It should be very simple. Oh, this is the first, the best, or the only. And it should be like in your neighborhood, or in the world, or on this block. So the Riddler San Francisco, we wanted to be the first champagne bar in San Francisco. It's really easy to understand. It's easy for you to understand yourself, easy for your team to understand. We were the first champagne bar in San Francisco. We were also the best, and we were also the only. So if you can do all three, that's great. It's very newsworthy to do things that are first, or best, or only. Our goal at the Riddler in New York was to create the best champagne bar in the world. I think we did it. We only lasted 3 months, but if any of you were there, I think you would agree. It was badass. It was so cool, and we got a ton of press as being, the best, or one of the best, or about to be the best champagne bar in the world. That was something that we told ourselves, we told our team, we told our investors, and as I was fundraising, I said, we're building the best champagne bar in the world. So anybody who had already invested in the first in San Francisco was interested in investing in the best in the world. And then at UnFem, we're building the only large sparkling wine brand that was built out of a champagne bar, and specifically not in a boardroom. So if you look at all of the large champagne and sparkling wine brands that exist in the world right now, they're either very, very, very old, they're like 250 years old, or they're brands that have started truly in a boardroom, and we're building something really authentic. So we talk about that a lot as a team. We're also intentionally building the first wine brand that proves that investing in women is not only good for business, but is the right thing to do. Okay, so if you've decided your first, best, or only. You know what people are going to say when they walk by your restaurant. Now, the next thing you have to do is to create a deck. I would really recommend Googling best fundraising decks. There are lots of examples of these in the venture capital world. If you go on Twitter, look on Twitter. They're everywhere on Twitter. It's good to look at what's happening in VC, because people who are pitching to VC are pitching at the highest level. So you might as well hold yourself to that standard, even if you're raising from angels, because one day you might be pitching to VC. Plus, all of your angel investors will say, wow, what an impressive deck. I also really recommend building your decks in Canva. Canva is a very inexpensive service that makes very attractive decks. I built my decks today in Canva. They're pretty simple. And they have a lot of decks formats that are specifically for fundraising, for VC and private equity decks. If you have enough cash, you can also invest in a graphic designer, but Canva does a great job. And I think the things that you need to cover in your deck are who, what, where, when, why. These are good things that you should know about your business anyway. So who are you? Who's on your team? Why is your team the best? Why do you deserve to build this business? What are you building? What's your first, best, or only? Where? Talk about where specifically on your block are you opening this business? What makes this particular location special? Have really beautiful visual interest around that. Say which other businesses are right in your neighborhood. Indicate like why that neighborhood is up and coming, or why is it particularly relevant right now. When, obviously the timeline, how far along in the timeline, and why. always, as Simon Sinek says, start with your why. Why are you building this thing? And really what motivates you, your team, what's your mission, what's your vision, what are your values? Another thing that I recommend for decks is to make them very visual, really paint a picture, tell a lot of stories, romance these people. Of course, you're going to have all of your financials in here. You have to make sure that you've got a real understanding of the numbers. I'm going to walk through a couple of my financial slides. But the way, if you see some of these bottom slides, you'll see this is my first deck for the Riddler in San Francisco before I had any idea of exactly what the space was going to look like. It was all like what in my mind, in my heart, on my Pinterest boards, what I thought this place was going to look and feel like. We all in the restaurant industry get to welcome our guests into a really beautiful space, so you might as well do the same thing in your deck. As we just talked about in the last talk, figure out how much money you need and raise a lot more. Make sure that you're paying yourself a lot. Whether that's 100K, probably not way beyond 100K, but like make sure you're paying yourself a legit salary. Do not structure your business in a way that you have to have a second job. Like this needs to be your job. This is a job. It's not a charity. I can't say it enough. So make sure you're paying yourself. And if anybody has problems with that, you definitely don't want that person to invest in you.
I had a prospective investor say to me, I only invest in people who live in their cars and eat Twinkies. And if you can afford to live in any better style than that, I'm not going to invest in you. And I said, if I'm living in my car eating Twinkies, then I'm making bad decisions about my business because I'm panicked. So you want to have enough money where you're not panicked. I think that's so important. Yeah.
It's absolutely true. It's hard, I think, especially for us as women, we sometimes feel like, oh, I don't want to give up that amount of equity, or I don't want to disappoint these people or make them feel like I just don't deserve it. But that's you have to pay yourself a good amount. You have to have enough time in your day to like go to the gym, sleep, do all the things that make you a successful captain of the ship.
What are some messaging that you may have shared with, this is for both of you ladies, that you may have shared with women and said, listen, it's okay to invest in yourself, it's okay to, like, what are some words that I could share with my female clients to say, you deserve to go ahead and get a business loan, you deserve to get an investor and give up some of the equity, which will help you grow your business. What are some words that you've said to them to inspire them?
I think it's really one of the things, because I used to be in the financial world. Well, I still am. I do more finance now as a business owner than I ever did at Goldman Sachs, to be honest. But with our clients, it was always, I'd ask people, like, what does the last day of your business look like? When you're shutting out the lights for the very last time, what does it look like? And people will say anything from, you're pulling me out in a body bag, I'm never going to leave this business, to I'm handing the keys to my son, or I'm selling it, or whatever it is. And I'd be like, okay, great. So when people say things, when they come back and like, well, I can't do that. I was like, how are we going to get there? Right. How do we get there? And then you build a path back from that, and you realize, make the list of the things you're really good at that you can do by yourself, and make a list of the things that you're going to need help with. Because one of the best things you can do as an entrepreneur and as a business owner is recognize what you don't know how to do. Yeah. Because you'll spend 90% of your time trying to figure out what you know how to do and do that, and then everything else goes by the wayside. What do I not know how to do? Print money. I mean, if I did, shoot, I'd be living someplace else and doing something else. But you have to say, the money is going to come, it's going to enable me. It's a tool. I need to buy flour, I need to buy a mixer, I need money. And you need to look at it that way. There's such a stigma about money in so many cultures, and especially amongst women. It's like a bad thing. It's like, no, money is just another tool, and you need it, and you're going to get it from the right sources.
I think that's so true. I think the other thing is you have to remember you are the asset. Like people who are choosing to invest in you, it's not about like you asking for charity or you asking for a donation.
Yeah.
Like the idea is that the people who are investing in you are investing in you because they believe that you can give them a good return on their money, or they're excited to go to the place that you're going to operate and get extra special treatment and a warm welcome at the door. But you really have to remember that you are the asset. And
most of these businesses, people that invest in these businesses are investing in the entrepreneur. So they're looking at you for everything. So it's a great idea, it's a beautiful concept, it's great food, it's wonderful CPG, but they're looking at you. And so if you come in and you're kind of like, I hope that's okay, they're not going to take it. I go into every meeting, even when I was first starting out, and I had 3 different phone numbers and 3 different emails. And I also, this is a longer story, I do accents, I do voiceover, speak a bunch of languages. So every one of my emails and phone numbers had a different person. There was like Ursula, and then no, I'm not kidding. But even at that point, I would walk in and be like, I have this great opportunity, and you might be the right person for me, I'm not sure. And all of a sudden it went from, wait a second, I thought you were going to try to convince me, and I was like, oh, and I have, all things are going on. Here's everything that I've done. Let me understand a little bit more about your investment style and see if that fits for me. And all of a sudden you flipped it. You've just flipped it. And that's what you need to do. You have to believe in yourself. And that's really hard because it's really personal. When somebody says no to your business, it feels like they're saying no to you. And then after a while, you kind of get a thicker skin and just be like, okay, they weren't the right person for me, which is your point, which is you've got to find the right people for you.
Yeah, it's so true. The way that I got all of my investors in the first 2 locations of the Riddler, as I said, 33 in San Francisco, I went through my phone, my email, every contact list I had, and I picked out every single woman who I thought might have $5,000. It's a lot of women. And I reached out to them to just get coffee or get drinks. Better to do it over drinks. And, met up with them, didn't tell them what I was working on, chat. Oh my God, how are you doing? What's up? Oh my God, you look amazing. Did you lose weight? You look so great. Love the earrings. And we're chatting, we're having such a good time. And we spent the first 45 minutes talking about them, me learning all about them, rekindling our relationship, et cetera. And then they'd be like, oh, wait, what are you working on? It's like, oh, thanks so much for asking. I'm working on opening a champagne bar. It's going to be at this location. It's going to be so amazing. This is what we're going to do. This is who's on the team. I'm so excited about it. And I'm raising money only from women. I have half the money raised already. All that's required is a check of $10,000. It doubled how much I thought they might have. And it's so cool. We already have 22 women involved. It's amazing. And I didn't ask for money. And almost all of them said, wait, how much? 10,000? Oh wait, I might have $5,000. Can I invest? What's involved? And so it became part of this community-based thing, and it was not a hard sell. And that was the case for the 2 first locations of the Riddler. I had a pretty different fundraising process with the wine company because it was a more traditional investment. Okay, so here are some key components to your deck that you must have. Number 1, you must have a budget. Components of the budget that you must know for your business are how much your asset purchase is going to be. So if you are buying somebody out of the space or there's some sort of key money, how much that's going to be. How much your equipment costs, your furniture, all of your personal services like graphic design, logo design, accounting and tax prep, of course. Organizational development, so things like your lease, your travel, your licenses, your permits, all of the beautiful aspects of building out a restaurant. To me, I was surprised that those were so tiny in comparison to everything else in the business. I thought that would be everything that I was raising was going into making the space beautiful. That was about a fifth of the overall raise. All of the finishes, pre-opening expenses, all of the inventory, so all of the champagne, all of the food, all of the products themselves that are going to get consumed that will turn into COGS. Some sort of budget for marketing, some sort of opening. And then, of course, your team, your management, and all of your hourly employees. I would recommend budgeting out at least a month, if not more, especially for your management team. You're going to want to have that management team in there with you for 2, 3, 4 months while you're getting everything up and running, and you need to pay them. And then some sort of working capital. So your working capital should be, working capital and contingency should cover at least 3 months of operating profit or operating cost, and then working capital at least 50 or 100K. And that's just if you go over budget. So this is a pretty small project cost for a restaurant build out, 500K. This was my first actual budget for the Riddler in San Francisco, and we actually were able to stick to it. It was a 500 square foot space. So tiny, very, very small. Yeah. So, but you can open a restaurant with 500K. That's possible. Some people do it for less.
In San Francisco. Very hard to do in New York.
Yes.
Yeah.
So my next restaurant was 1.5 million, and we were over budget. Another component to your deck that you must have is some sort of a projected P&L. Make sure you know how to read a P&L. Make sure you know how to interpret a P&L, know what looks good, know what looks bad. This is a pretty typical P&L. I always think about things around prime cost. So prime cost is a combination of your sales around food and beverage, less the cost of goods, and less the cost of payroll. That's your prime cost. That's the most important indicator of the health of a restaurant business. And you want to make sure that you're bonusing your team based off of how healthy your prime cost is. So you can set your own prime cost, but our target was always right around 60%. Another thing that we always talk about and think about in my family, my husband also has 6 Greek restaurants. If you're from San Francisco, he owns Souvla. We always talk about make sure that you can pay your rent in a month, or excuse me, in a day, in terms of your the amount of cash you're bringing into the business every day. So if your rent is, let's say, $10,000 a month, you should be targeting to do $10,000 in sales per day. If you can't do it in a day, try to do it in 2. That's a very healthy business. Other things that you'll want here are your controllables. So those are the things that you have control over. So like, let's say marketing costs or repairs and maintenance. And then there are other pieces that you can't really control, which are related to occupancy or amortization, things like that. So again, I'll send this around, but make sure you have a P&L in there, make sure it looks good, and make sure you think you can stick to it. Another piece you want is a hypothetical return on investment for your investors. Make sure your lawyer looks at this as well. And the way that I did it was in a 5-year payback based off of what the capital in was, what the profits would be, what our distribution would look like, and then the cumulative distribution over time. And this is something that it's good to look back at on a yearly basis and see if you're able to stick to it. And your goal, obviously, is to try to be able to pay people back based off of the timeline that you're recommending. So a lot of times people will ask you, if I put in my money, how long will it take me to get my money back? And you say, if I hit all of the things that I showed you on the budget and the P&L, this is what your payback theoretically is going to look like. And then 2 other things that you should have in there that are just really practical. Number 1, you should definitely bring on an attorney who can write an offering agreement for you. They can be short, like this. You'll probably have a much more extended offering agreement as well that's like a legal document. That offering agreement basically outlines what the rights of the investor are, as well as your rights as the owner. If you're an LLC, it will indicate that you cannot be sued, essentially, for closing the business. But if you do take out a personal guarantee on your lease, your landlord can sue you for that money. Additional things you'll want to include are like fun investor benefits. So I realize this is really small, but things like discounted access to wine, early seating at tables, your name on the back of a bar stool, those kinds of things. Those are fun things that are essentially free for you as an operator that are really, really beneficial when you're pitching investors that people always want to be a part of. I think most people who are investing in restaurants when they're not institutional investors are looking to support you as a cool restaurant owner and operator and to have a place that they can say, oh, I'm an investor here. And they walk in the door, they get recognized, they get a table. That's what most people want. They ideally want their money back too, but the most important thing, I think, in a lot of cases is like the primo seating. Okay, so you've written your deck looks amazing, you've sent it around to your friends, everybody thinks it looks really cool. The next thing that you should do is put together a really great pitch. Again, sorry in the back that this is so small, but this was my original pitch for the Riddler in San Francisco, which basically says, hi, how are you? It's so great to connect with you. A couple weeks ago, I signed my lease. It's small, it's amazing. This is what makes it so cool. We're fundraising entirely from a group of women. We already have $260K committed from about 20 other women that include 10 to 20K checks. I'd love to have you involved. Whether or not you're interested, would love to tell you about it and hope you're doing well. And then attached the 2 decks. I will say when I pitch, I never, ever, ever pitch with a deck. That's true for me even when pitching institutional capital for a $10 million raise. I always would pitch like in person, have a conversation, read the room, understand what makes the person who I'm talking to interested, what makes them tick, asking them questions around, have you ever invested in another restaurant before? Do you like champagne? All of those kinds of things that can give me some more information. It's kind of like a sales technique of doing doing research on the person who's pitching you and making sure that you're having like an actual real conversation with them. This was my pitch email that landed me $10 million. So this basically is saying, this is like a little bit more aggressive, I would say. So it's like, hi, I'm the co-founder of Umber Wines, the fastest growing sparkling wine brand in the US. So the fastest growing sparkling wine brand in the US, with national partnerships with Delta, the Ritz-Carlton, the St. Regis, and beyond. We're currently raising our Series A, and I would love to connect. Our deck is available here. You can use DocSend to send your deck around, and you can see who has actually clicked into your deck. You can see how many minutes they've spent on each slide. You can see when they've left the deck. DocSend is a great, great, great service. It also makes you look really, really buttoned up. And then I linked out to Unfem and the Riddler as examples of things that provided credit for me. I'm launching Unfem because I had these 2 champagne bars, which were named Champagne Bar of the Year. So like giving me credit in terms of I'm legit, and really expressing what the problem was. So of the $43 billion sparkling wine market, 100% of the top brands are over 100 years old. None are digitally native, none have a nimble supply chain, and none are contemporary in their approach. We at Unfem are building that brand. And the next thing that I did was to show what our sales traction was. So we've grown really dramatically. We started with 1,600 cases, then 4,000 cases. This last year we did 89,000 cases, so up and to the right. So if you've got that, use that, show that. If you doubled your sales, if you 1.5 your sales, show that. People want to see growth and forward movement. If you're going from 1 to 2 locations, show that. People love seeing, here's my original traction, here's the success that I'm looking at going forward, and brag. Like, just brag. And then like do whatever you can to anchor yourself in cool partners. Like people judge you by the company you keep. So us saying that we work very closely with Delta Airlines as a global partner makes people say, these guys probably know what they're doing. And then, oh, Ritz-Carlton, oh, that sounds really exciting. So do the same thing with you in terms of who your chef is going to be, who your beverage director is going to be. If you've gotten any press, link out to that press, all of those kinds of things. So this, I would say, I talk to women all the time about fundraising. I would say this is hard for a lot of people to brag this much, but like this is how it's done. Just every guy is doing this. Just do it. It's, it works. So I really recommend it. Okay, another important detail, work your network. This is an actual screenshot of my ongoing multiple thousand entry master contact list. It has many, many, many more columns, but this is how I organize every single person who I've really ever met. It's their name, their contact information, their title, their email, their phone numbers if I've got them, website, city, and notes, where I met them, when I met them, going back 20 plus years. And then I have check marks for all these different categories. So if they're press, if they're chefs, if they're sponsors, if they're VCs, if they're private equity. This is something that you can do today. You probably already have some version of this, but just like build it out more. Or if this feels overwhelming, build it out less, but just have like a massive, massive contact list. And I go back to this contact list like at least quarterly for all kinds of things. We use it for building out our sales channels, use it for building out partnerships, and we've certainly used it for fundraising. And this is something that is absolutely 100% free, but it's gold. It's amazing. So all of you will get added to this list for me tomorrow. Okay, 2 more final things. So I would say my biggest learning from the Riddler is I did not do this the first time. I did not build a great, highly communicative relationship with my investors in the Riddler in San Francisco and the Riddler in New York. I had like fine relationships with them. I wasn't great at getting them their tax documents on time. I wasn't great, which is called your K1. Make sure you have those on lock. I wasn't great at like really bragging about what we were doing. I wasn't great at sharing challenges. I was not good at asking for advice or questions or help. I just kind of was operating in my own world. I think as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, as a restaurant owner, you get so wrapped up in the day-to-day. And you see the investors, they come in, oh, hey, it's great to see you, free glass of champagne. But I wasn't good at sending a quarterly update or semi-annual update. I was sending about once a year updates. And so when we had to close, that was really hard. I hadn't built like a really, really deep relationship with them. Luckily, I was friends with a lot of these people. I had told everybody you might lose your money. They knew that going in, but it was the one thing, and the thing that still keeps me up at night is if I had kept them involved every single month, I would have felt a lot more comfortable closing the business. I don't think I would have changed anything. I don't think we would have had a different decision, but I think they would have felt more part of it. Now, and something I recommend absolutely, we send monthly, very, very, very thorough updates. They're mostly us bragging. And like, you can't read this, it's tiny, but it's a lot, it's just bragging. And then, and it's great because it also gives us an opportunity to ask people for all kinds of help. So we just launched at the Ritz-Carlton, but we're having trouble getting the Ritz at every location to turn on the wines. Please go into your local Ritz-Carlton and ask for our wine. Tough job. Everybody's got to do it who's an investor. Send us the bill. Everybody's happy to go into the Ritz and ask for the wines. It gives us just a really good two-way street with all of those investors. And then we also do quite a bit of this investor relations, I would say, on Twitter. Twitter is one of your best resources for finding investors. VC and private equity is still all over Twitter. I realize a lot of people have left Twitter in the last 2 months. But still, the entire investment community is still very, very alive and well on Twitter. And so we will post a lot of things about key milestones in terms of sales and big partnerships that we're launching. So I really recommend that. So make sure you connect with them. So we send our investor updates on a monthly basis. We have somebody on our team whose responsibility it is. That happens to be my co-founder. And we send them out. We get incredibly positive responses from people. We also get tons of sales leads. It's like one of our best channels for bringing in new business into the company. So even though it feels like it takes a lot of time, it will pay dramatic dividends and it will make you sleep better at night. Plus, you can probably get more fundraising from them in the future. And then my last 2 pieces of advice. The good old Henry Ford quote, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. So if you just keep believing that you're going to raise the money that you need to, you will get there. It's really hard. It took me a year to raise 650. It took me 2 years to raise $1 million. It took me another year to raise another $1 million. And then it took me like 3 months to raise 10 million when we had like seen a lot of traction. So it gets easier and easier over time as you have more experience doing it, as you have a larger network, as people believe in you more, but you just have to keep going. Like that's the reality. Everybody who fundraises successfully just keeps doing it. The other piece that I think is really important for all entrepreneurs to know about everything is that up and to the right is not just simply up and to the right. It's successes and failures, successes and failures, successes and failures all along the way. And those failures are just as important as the successes, if not more. And that's really where all the growth happens. Like that's where you learn much more about yourself, about your team, about your business. It's the same thing as like going to the gym or working out in any way. Like learning any skills, those failures keep re-educating you as to what you can accomplish because they can feel really, really awful in the moment. But like 5 days later, boom, something else good happens and you just keep going. So the resilience is incredibly foundational for everything else that you do. Okay, 2 final slides, then I'll hand it over. So I've got a slide in here, which you guys can see when we send it around afterwards. These are just basic terms for when you're fundraising that you should know. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I know for me, once I got more comfortable with the language, I felt a lot more comfortable pitching. They're all pretty easy to understand, but you'll get better and better at them over time. But just make sure you know things like when someone says, are you in the red or in the black? You know what that means. If they're talking about above the line or below the line, you know what that means. If they're asking you if you're raising on a safe or a priced round, you know what that means. If it's a dividend-based business, equity business, et cetera. Knowing the answers to those kinds of questions about your business will make you feel a lot more confident. And if you proactively say them in the conversation, will make you much more likely to be able to raise money. And then my final slide here, I've got some specific recommendations on content that you should consume, most of which is incredibly fun. My biggest recommendation is to listen to a podcast called All In, which is for billionaires. They're all men. They're on both sides of the aisle. Do you listen to All In?
No.
Oh, you don't? Okay. Do we have anybody in private equity in here? Or VC? No. Everybody in VC and private equity listens to All In. It's for billionaires, and they talk a lot about the macro environment. So they help you to understand what's going on in the economy, what's going on in the world, how that affects fundraising. They talk about valuations. They talk about founders. They fund mostly very large-scale private equity deals, but it's really, really fun to listen to, and you will learn so much. I've learned more from that podcast in the past year than any other content I've consumed. Yeah, it's amazing. It's very fun. The other one is watch Shark Tank. Make sure you know how to answer the questions on Shark Tank. Don't take any deals that look like Shark Tank's deals. They're very, very predatory deals. But if you can answer all of the questions that those founders are answering, you are a million steps ahead of everybody else who's fundraising right now. And they ask the same questions over and over again. And just want to say a huge thank you to CohnReznick for having us today. This is super helpful, and we're huge fans of CohnReznick, and thank you so much to the Beard Foundation, because these kinds of conversations are really important for women.
My name is Umber Ahmad. I'm the founder of Mazadar Bakery. We started in 2014, and we are coming up on our 10-year anniversary. I started as an online business. I wanted to make sure that there was an actual need and a desire for the product that I was producing. And after about 6 months doing online, I grew to the point where I couldn't do it out of my apartment anymore, and moved into a mentor of mine's kitchen. And so the mentor is Tom Colicchio. I don't know if you guys know that name. He's the mean, bald chef on Top Chef. Was very supportive of the beginnings of my business and let me move into one of his kitchens. We grew out of that, moved into the basement of a bar because our kitchen wasn't ready. So for 4 months, we produced all of our food out of the basement of a bar on the Upper West Side. So everything we made smelled like falafel because the bar specialized in falafel. So at night they would fry falafel and everything smelled like falafel. Moved into a temporary kitchen for about 7 months while we produced and built our first bakery. Had one bakery for about 4.5 years. And then during the pandemic, I did something that my father calls accelerating through the curve. And that is, my father thought it'd be funny that I would learn how to drive in the Alps in Italy. My mother didn't think that was funny. And he found an old race car driver to teach me how to drive. And one of the main things that they always teach you when you're driving is when you're going into a curve, you decelerate, right? Because they say you slow down as you're going through the curve. But about halfway through that curve, if you don't start accelerating, by the time you get through that curve, you're not going fast enough to keep up with everybody else. So that became kind of this motto in our family, you got to accelerate through the curve. So while COVID was going on, I was like, you know what I'm going to do with all these grants and loans? I want to accelerate through the curve. So coming out of COVID, we had 3 more bakeries, and today we now have a total of 7. And a majority of that was done without external funding outside of loans. So one of the things that I just want to bring up, which is, one of the considerations is to take equity, which we also did. But another way to build a business is to do it through loans. There are an exceptional number of loans that are out there for female-led businesses, for women of color, women from specific backgrounds, things that you have to dig for. And then I will send around a list of the ones that I've used or availed myself of. And then other things you just don't expect. I would apply for every single loan that I could. I applied for a loan from Uber Eats. I was like, all right, applied for it. Turns out it was in partnership with Visa. We got the loan, or the grant rather, $10,000. And what's nice about a grant is you don't have to return the money. And then we got a commercial out of it. So now we're in a national commercial, which is kind of fun. But what I think just the main message when you start thinking about fundraising is a couple of things. One is, what will this money help me do? What do I need to achieve by when I raise this capital that's going to help me achieve X, Y, Z, whatever it is. And then when you think about what you want to achieve, it helps you figure out where you're going to get that money from, right? So equity is great because you can go to your sources, you can go to your relationships, you go to people that you know, people that you don't know. Equity is expensive. And when I say it's expensive, it's because you're giving up a piece of your company. That's the only way to raise equity. The earlier stage you are, the younger you are in your business age, the more you're going to give up, right? Because, and this is, it happened to all of us. We have very little leverage at that point. other than here's this business, we want to give as much away as possible to raise that money. If that's okay with you, then that works. If you, in the end, think, gosh, I don't want to work 180 hours a week to own 15% of my own business, then you're like, okay, that might not be my answer now. Maybe later, as you're more mature in your business, you can say, hey, I've got these 3 or 4 locations, I've got this going on, I've got this going up, this great CPG product. You're coming with something to the table. You can negotiate a smaller amount of equity for what you think you can get. So go for grants and go for loans. Grants are, again, things you don't pay back. There's one place called Hello Alice. If you guys don't subscribe to Hello Alice, you should. They list a ton of grants every single day. I think I've gotten 6 grants out of that for probably a total of about $400,000. Yeah, and so, and the things are, and it's very interesting. So they'll say, if you have this percentage of people that come from these backgrounds and X% of your revenue services this population, you qualify. 1 out of 100 you'll qualify, but you'll qualify for that one. So think about the grants and think about loans. I think earlier in the day there was a whole conversation about different types of debt lending. What you really have to figure out is, can I pay this back? Because with loans you have to pay it back. What the good side of equity is, be prepared to lose this money. That's what I always say to everybody. If you never see this money again, we have to be okay, you have to be okay. But with loans, you have to pay it back. Otherwise, they start repossessing something from you. So just keep that in mind. Can I pay this back? Can I pay it back in the amount of time that they're going to want from me? So I would just sort of like think through that. One of the easiest ways to get quick money is called a merchant cash advance. Don't do it. Don't do it. I did it once when we were in a really, really tough bind, and they took so much money from us that it almost killed us, to be honest. Because they're like, oh, it's great, your money will be in 24 hours, and then all of a sudden you realize how much interest you're paying. And I did it very, very early on when we found ourselves in a situation where our contractor ran away with $500,000. He's in prison now, thankfully, on drug charges, which are unrelated. Well, I guess not unrelated, because he probably used the money to go buy the drugs. I don't know. But just sort of thinking, you want, at the end of the day, you want to be safe, and you want to know that you can continue on to the next day. So just as you're thinking about loans, you're just thinking about things like that. All the government funding, if you can get any sort of government funding, I think that's very helpful. Everyone will tell you, go get a line of credit. Most banks aren't going to give you a line of credit, because they'll say to you, well, how much money are you generating? Like, what does your revenue stream look like? What does your profit line look like? And you'd be like, bitch, I just started. I have nothing, right? And then so they're like, and even the SBA, they have very high standards, as they should. And a lot of the SBA loans, well, they'll say, well, once you get to this point, you can come to us for a loan. And I was like, once I get to that point, I don't need a loan. I'm operating my business. So you just want to sort of think about, there are a lot of sort of opportunities out there for you. Equity is also really important. One of the things that I will say just before we turn it over to Q&A is one of your biggest pitch decks is the internet. The minute somebody finds out about you, they're going to Google you. Or they're going to Google the name of your business, and they're going to want to know about you. They're going to want to know who's talking about you. One of the things that Jen mentioned, any press that you get or any attention you get, it's going to be on there. That's going to help them. And then if like the internet's talking about it, you should be talking about it. You are the prize. You are what people are investing in. You are what people want. People want to invest. I mean, a lot of people don't think that's true. People want to invest. They want to put their money into interesting opportunities. They want to brag. They want to be like, oh, I can, all of our investors, they send our pastries out as holiday gifts. They want to be like, oh, let me send you something from my bakery. Great. That's fine. There's no ownership in that. Go. You absolutely call it your bakery. I have no problem with that. People want that sort of sense of ownership and partnership. And I agree, communicating is really important, the ups and the downs. Because I think if you just kind of try to it's like a rosy picture of what's happening, it's really tough when in the end you're like, I'm really sorry we lost everything, which happens. And that's okay, because then it gives you a chance to get up and try again. I would say we have raised a total of about $2.6 million. And I've taken close to $1 million in a combination of grants and loans. My most recent, we need to raise capital because we want to continue to grow and build. But I stopped because I said, I need to be able to prove myself. That trajectory, that ability to say, here's what I've done, is extraordinarily important because that's what people look at. And so I said, all right, we're just going to stop. I went to a couple of my extremely wealthy friends and I said, listen, you can't even count your money. Like, just this is what I need. And this is how I think we can structure it. We negotiated on the terms, and they lent me $700,000. not cheap, not the most expensive thing, but it gives me an opportunity to get over that hump, to say, okay, now I'm going to go forward and do something. The only other thing I will say is a majority of your investors are going to come from a place you never expected. A place like you sent that email and it came back with a $10 million investment. You didn't expect that. I gave you cookies, A, because I'm really proud of what we do, B, because I wanted you guys to have a snack and some sugar to stay awake, and C, because you're not going to forget me now. Okay? So I'm like Mary fucking Poppins. Every time I leave the house, I have food in my bag. Every time. Because I just never know. I was in a meeting talking about an agriculture deal with a friend of mine. This is years ago. And his partner walks in, and she's like, what are you doing? And so we started talking, and we started chatting a little bit. And I was like, oh, wait, before you leave, take some snacks with you. And she's like, what are these? And I said, oh, I just started a bakery. It's online only, blah, 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 blah. She takes them. I get a call that evening. This gentleman with a heavy Australian accent. He says, my name's Jamie Perry. I'm the chief marketing officer for JetBlue. I was like, okay, is this a wrong number? And he said, no, my wife got pastries from you this afternoon, and we're looking for a partner to create pastries for our mint service that we're launching next month. So we got that deal. There were two of us, myself and one person. The first week, we had 16 passengers. We lined up all the boxes and counted them twice and closed them ourselves and everything. 2.5 years of a relationship with them. At the end of it, we were doing 24,000 passengers a month because I had food in my bag. So always just think about, and you may not have food in your bag, you have other things, but there's just always an opportunity to talk about what you're doing and getting people excited about that. And then every investor is going to be able to help you in some different ways. Ask. You just never know. Like, hey, I needed a lot of help actually figuring out how to move a mixer from one location to the other. I had no idea. Turns out one of my investors also was a partner in a construction company, and he sent a crane. So everyone will help you in ways you never expected, because they're investing in you. You are the prize. You are what people want. And if you don't believe it, no one else is going to believe it. Thank you.